Hello, honor students. How are you? Hope all is good. Let us today continue what we have started two times before. Literally theories in brief. Very brief summary. Part 3. We agreed that in case we want to criticize or write a piece of criticism about certain topic or text, we need to follow the pattern of theories. And I advise you to revise what we have said in the previous part 1, part 2. Let's continue with the mythological theory. Mythological theory is one of the universal story patterns that we need to make sure that we are covering that before we start. For example, you can go for a common, familiar, universal human experiences when you try to criticize the mythological theory. In order to do so, of course, we have to think about myth in terms of religion. We think about myth in terms of social customs, cultural attitudes, when we are trying to represent our point of view for the mythological theory. The common human events are used to be symbolic at this time. For example, birth means beginning, death means the end, etc. So please revise also the session that we had together about symbolism before you are going to write your own perspective, point of view, using mythological theory. Mythological theory can be identified, analyzed, or even evaluated, as we agreed one of the command questions, through the archetypes. Archetypes, universal symbols found in all types of literature throughout history and around the world. The story types can be a quest, can be revenge, can be death, can be loss, can be transformation, can be enlightenment, and more, much more than that. Of course, when we took it together in the session, how to compose the myth, how to use certain vocab for composing the myth, I want you to remember this session when you're trying to evaluate or analyze using mythological theory. Number 8, you're going to think about structuralism. Of course, when we think about theory, we need to have language, comment, anthropology. We think about anthology if we are actually think about the structure of poetry. So the language as an arbitrary system of signs can also be giving a structuralism. Focus on the binary opposition. Please revise this in the session. And my students are going to get more sheets right before the exam for binary opposition. Onomatopoeia. We shouldn't forget about onomatopoeia and onomatopoeic use of the sounds, like pleasant versus unpleasant, soft versus harsh, harmony versus discord, as we took it in our live session. Now, if you want to identify and analyze the binary opposites, you need to analyze the sounds, as we said, onomatopoeic, letters, and syllabuses. As we said about the haiku is going to have 5 syllabuses in the first line, 7 syllabuses in the second line, and 5 more in the third line. So if you are trying to analyze that, would be very good to write the name of the type of the poem and try to analyze it from the onomatopoeic sounds and syllabuses. Evaluate the differences in the word and the sentence structure. You need to do that when you think about structuralism. Structuralism is an important question when you are trying to think about the theories and how to comment on them. Structuralism and semiotics. How can we think about that? We think about the sign, as we agreed, and the sign systems and the codes that we have learned in the session also. How signs help in understanding human interaction. Literature is only one aspect of all this. How is this possible? You need to identify and analyze the signs in the text. This is number one. And preferably that you highlight it for yourself in the exam, so you don't miss any symbol or any character. Evaluate the signs to guide interpretation of the text, and utilize signs of one text to evaluate and interpret other texts too. So if they're giving you kind of text A, text B, one of them is a poem, or maybe one of them is a prose, or maybe one of them is a part of a drama. You have to think about, especially for drama, you have to think about, is it a soliloquy? Is it going to be a monologue? What kind of drama? Is it tragedy, dark comedy? And then you need to write that as an introduction, and then go after that to evaluate the signs and the guides of interpretation. What did the writer write as a kind of foreshadow to the reader? What do we get from this? As we said, when we think about birth, we are thinking about beginning. When we think about death, we are thinking about the sign or symbolism of end. What about the deconstruction? The deconstruction theory drives, and it comes from, of course, structuralism. The binary opposites are seen as equally valid, and we discussed that many times all through term 3, actually. It reveals prevailing ideologies that are questioned in the text. It emphasizes ambiguity. Never forget about that in all texts. Language is oppositional. All texts are self-contradictory. The meaning of the text is elusive. And we spoke about the theory of allusion as well. So please revise that from the sheets before the exam. Reduce the text to binary oppositions. And also analyze the binary opposites. Try to evaluate ambiguities in the text and how they differ in the meaning. What about number 10 theory, cultural studies? Multidisciplinary utilizes all forms of criticism. So the multidiscipline, as we said about it before, it gives me the forms of criticism that I need to highlight and analyze and evaluate in my text. Humanistic disciplines and scenes, we need to make sure that we are getting that. So the cultural studies, we are getting the culture as a way of life, best for humanity. It focuses on the conflict inside and between the cultures. And please revise the 6 types of conflict that we mentioned. Identify challenges and differences to be accepted as norms and values. Evaluate how challenges redraw so-called cultural boundaries. Analyze the differences of cultures. So the culture studies, it gives also a gender study, and this came as a question in 2020 exams. Number 1, as we said before, feminist criticism. You have to think about that. Gay lesbian studies, you have to think about that. Identify and analyze how gender is defined in the text. Sometimes it can be neutral. Be careful, especially nowadays writings. Evaluate the differences of cultural gender versus biological gender as presented in a text. Analyze and evaluate sexual orientation of characters in the text. Utilizes all what we can think about psychological, using the psychological theory, by the way. Queer about the theory. Identify all people or characters as queer to be actually in the middle way. Acknowledge that there is no such thing as normal. You have to know that, and you have to highlight that in your writing also. Evaluate the lack of sexual gender boundaries. So my point is, whenever we are criticizing, we are thinking about the evaluation and analysis of the text. These are the main points for revision before the exam. So if you think that you learned something new today, please thumb up, drop a comment or a question or a query, share with others so they can benefit. Subscribe, don't forget to ring the bell, and wait for more about books. that is recommended for literature with Karima. See you soon. Bye.